Chapter 1184. 1184 Ciel Wan fights D. Who is it? The barbarian emperor let out a long roar, and his aura burst forth. He soared into the sky and punched at the giant hand. Boom! There was a shocking boom, and then the barbarian emperor's body trembled. He was actually no match for the barbarian emperor and was blasted down. The huge hand did not stop and continued to grab Lu Ming. Enveloped by this huge hand, Lu Ming felt as if the space around him had been locked down. Lu Ming's body was pressed down by endless gravity, making it difficult for him to move. Death! Lu Ming shouted. He was very familiar with the aura of this big hand. It was De, a martial emperor. Lu Ming did not expect that martial emperor De would make a move at this time. Previously, Lu Ming had thought that De might take action. However, the Demon God Valley had a sovereign. Lu Ming thought that De would be afraid. Boom, boom, boom. 8 streams of dragon energy burst forth in Lu Ming's body. At the same time, his third bloodline emerged, and a powerful force surged into Lu Ming's body. Break, break. Lu Ming roared in his heart and exploded with all his strength, trying to break open the surrounding space. However, the surrounding space was extremely firm. With Lu Ming's current strength, he could not even move an inch. Who is it? You're looking for death. A long roar was heard. From another direction in the Demon God Valley, a demonic light shot up and a vast demonic blade slashed at the giant hand. Boom! After the barbarian emperor's punch and the saber, the huge hand finally collapsed and disappeared. The pressure on Lu Ming's body was also lifted. Lu Ming's body felt lighter and he regained his freedom. Buzz! With a flash of demonic light, Sulua appeared beside Lu Ming. The barbarian emperor also came to Lu Ming's side. An iron rod floated above the barbarian emperor's head, emanating a terrifying aura. It was an emperor's spiritual weapon. The two of them looked at the sky with a grave expression. A golden light flashed in the sky, and a figure stepped out of the spatial crack. It was Martial Emperor De of the East Baron. What do you want to do by coming to the Demon God Valley? Do you want to start a war with us? Chu Luo coldly shouted. In the Divine Wilderness continent, there were only so many emperors, so they naturally knew each other. I'm only here to take Lu Ming away. This has nothing to do with you. De's entire body bloomed with golden light. He stood high in the sky, like a high and mighty emperor, looking down on the common people. Take away General Lu? What a joke. De, not only can you not take anyone away today, but you can't even leave. The barbarian emperor's eyes flickered with a malevolent light. Buzz. Bush. At this moment, from all over the Demon God Valley, there were sounds of people flying through the air. The commotion just now had alarmed the entire Demon God Valley. Stop. Don't come over. Lu Ming's voice was heard and everyone stopped in their tracks. When the emperor took action, the others could not help at all. 2 people did not stop and directly flew over. They were Xian Yanqing and Yen Kuangtu. Lu Ming. Xian Yanqing held Lu Ming's hand and looked at De in the sky, looking worried. De. Yen Kuangtu licked his lips. The emperor's spirit tower floated above his head, revealing a powerful fighting spirit. If you don't hand it over, I'll personally take it. De's cold voice rang out. He clenched his fist in the air and a golden combat sword appeared. Buzz. Bush. The golden combat sword emitted an infinite amount of golden light. The sword light was as large as a mountain, and a vast pressure bloomed. It slashed down violently towards the barbarian emperor and the others. Attack! The barbarian emperor shouted and rose to the sky, holding the iron rod in his hand. The iron rod grew rapidly, turning into a giant rod tens of thousands of meters long, and swept toward De's sword light. At the same time, the demonic chi on Chu Luo's body soared to the sky, and he slashed out a huge saber light toward the sword light. Above Yen Kuangtu's head, the emperor's spirit tower expanded rapidly and crashed toward the sword radiance in the sky. Boom, boom, boom. 3 terrifying explosions sounded in succession. First, it was the barbarian emperor. He held a huge rod and smashed it against the sword light. His whole body trembled as if he was facing an undefeatable force. His body fell down like a cannonball. Then, Chu Luo's demonic blade was crushed by the sword radiance and finally collided with Yen Kuangtu's Emperor Spirit Tower. Bang, bang, bang. The barbarian emperor, Chu Luo, and Yen Kuangtu were sent flying one after another. They staggered in the sky and retreated hundreds of miles, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Yen Kuangtu's condition was the most serious. His face was pale and bloodless. In one move, Di had injured 2 emperors and Yen Kuangtu. He had displayed his terrifying combat power. How can he be so strong? Chu Luo shouted in disbelief. The barbarian emperor and Yen Kuangtu were both shocked. The 3 of them had to work together to block Di Yi's sword, but they were all injured. It was unbelievable. They had all dealt with Di before, but they had never expected that Di Yi's combat power would be so strong. No one can stop me from taking Lu Ming away, Di said coldly. He stretched out his hand and a big golden hand formed out of thin air. It exuded a vast pressure and grabbed Lu Ming. Don't even think about it. Yen Kuangtu, the barbarian emperor, and Chu Luo shouted loudly. They used their strongest move to stop Di. However, Di took a step and 3 golden sword lights condensed in the air. They hit the 3 of them and forced them back again. The golden hand did not stop and continued to grab Lu Ming. Boom! At this moment, the space in front of Lu Ming cracked open and a black fist radiance shot out. It collided with the golden hand and both of them disappeared. Then a tall figure stepped out. Fiend Ancestor. Chu Luo was overjoyed to see this person. Thank you, Chaos. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. Xiao Wan stood in front of Lu Ming, looked at Di and said, "It's rare to have an expert like you among the younger generation. But with me here, you can't take Lu Ming away. Chaotic Sky Emperor, you have been suppressed for 30,000 years and are no longer the same as before. Do you really think you can fight me?" Di spoke. Even in the face of the Chaotic Sky Divine Warrior, he was still full of confidence. "We'll know if we can fight him or not after we try. Let's go up and fight him." Xiao Wan took a step forward and rushed up to the sky. Di glanced at Lu Ming. He took a step forward and, together with Xiao Wan, rushed into the sky. Boom! An extremely terrifying rumble suddenly sounded from an unknown height. A bright light flashed out like a sun exploding in the sky. It could be seen even from millions of miles away. Boom! 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 Following that, terrifying rumbles rang out continuously in the sky. Rings of light lit up one after another, as if many suns had exploded at the same time. The scene was extremely shocking. Lu Ming and the others looked up into the sky, but they could only see a dazzling light. They could not see the figures of Di, Martial Emperor, and Xiaolun. So strong. Lu Ming furrowed his brows and was secretly shocked. The fluctuations and auras caused by the battle between Xiao Wan and Di were obviously much stronger than that of an ordinary emperor. What realm had they reached? My eyes! Someone exclaimed. Some people with low cultivation looked up at the battle in the sky. Their eyes were blinded by the light and they didn't dare to watch anymore. Chapter 1185. 1185 Di Yi's realm. In the sky, there were hundreds of explosions, as if hundreds of suns had exploded. If that kind of power landed on the ground, it could destroy the earth and penetrate the earth's crust, causing a terrible disaster. At this moment, the sky suddenly quieted down. All the fluctuations seemed to have suddenly disappeared without a trace. How is it? Everyone's hearts were in their throats. Buzz! At this moment, a figure flickered, and Xiao Wan appeared. At this moment, Xiao Wan's breathing was a little shallow. A trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. He had actually been injured. Chu Luo, the barbarian emperor, and the others found it unbelievable that Xiao Wan had been injured in the battle with Martial Emperor Di. Ancestor Devil, how is Di? Chu Luo asked. Di has retreated. Xiao Wan spoke, his eyes grave. I didn't expect the East Continent to have such a powerful cultivator. I can't defeat him with my current combat strength. Senior Xie, what realm has D reached? Lu Ming asked. To be honest, Di Yi's combat power was beyond his imagination. He had thought that Di was just an ordinary emperor. Now, it seemed that he was not. He was much stronger than an ordinary emperor. After this period of time, Xie Luan had recovered and was stronger than he had been a few months ago. However, he was still injured in the battle with Di. Lu Ming, the martial emperor realm is the same as the other realms. It is divided into 9 levels, but the difference between each level is huge. As for the divine wilderness continent, the conditions are too poor. It's not suitable for emperors to cultivate at all. To be able to break through to the emperor realm is already the limit. It's too difficult to go further. Hence, most of the emperors in the divine wilderness continent are at the first level martial emperor realm. For example, Barbarian Emperor, Chu Luo and the rest, as well as most of the emperors from the overlord forces in Central Continent, are all at the first level martial emperor realm. Xie Luan introduced. Chu Luo and the Barbarian Emperor nodded. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that the sovereigns he had met were only at the lowest level of martial emperors. Xie Luan continued to explain, once someone breaks through to level 2 martial royal realm, his combat strength will be greatly improved. He will be able to suppress and even kill other martial royal realm experts. The gap between level 1 martial royal realm experts is very obvious. I guess there are some martial royal realm experts in the royal family and the heaven-suppressing divine army. And my cultivation back then was at the 3rd level of the martial royal realm. Now, I have recovered to the peak of the 2nd level. However, it will be extremely difficult for me to recover to the 3rd level. Firstly, the conditions of the divine wilderness continent are too poor. Secondly, after being suppressed for so many years, my source has been injured. It will be very difficult for me to recover to the peak without a few years. Is Di Yi's cultivation also at the peak of the 2nd level of the martial royal realm? Lu Ming asked. That's right. Di Yi's cultivation is indeed at the peak of the level 2 martial royal realm. He's not far from the level 3 martial royal realm. I feel that Di can break into the level 3 martial royal realm at any time. By then, he will be unrivaled in the world and no one in the divine wilderness mainland can defeat him. Xie Luan said, his eyes grave. Di is so strong? Yan Kuangtu clenched his fists tightly. Lu Ming's eyes were solemn. He and Di had to fight a long time ago, but now it seemed that this battle would be more difficult than he had imagined. I have to improve my strength as soon as possible. Now, the second body has obtained the inheritance of the mysterious Sky Saint and is improving rapidly. My martial cultivation can't fall behind. If my martial cultivation and the second body both break into the Emperor realm, I can suppress Di even if he breaks through to the 3rd level of the martial Emperor realm. Lu Ming's eyes were filled with confidence and fighting spirit. If the main body and the secondary body both broke through to the Emperor realm and joined forces, their power would definitely be beyond imagination. All of you can leave. With a wave of Xie Luan's hand, everyone below the Emperor level dispersed. Xie Luan then looked at Lu Ming and said, Lu Ming, you don't have to worry too much. The conditions in the divine wilderness continent are really bad. It's extremely difficult for a martial artist in the Emperor realm to make a breakthrough. It's not that easy for Di to break through to the 3rd level of the martial royal realm. He might not be able to break through for a few years, or he might not be able to break through in his entire life. It's possible. Back then, I was stuck at the peak of the 3rd level of the martial royal realm and was unable to break through to the 4th level. He can't do anything to you if he can't break through to level 3 martial royal realm. Xie Luan smiled and consoled him. Thank you, senior, I'm fine. The stronger Di is, the stronger my motivation will be. I will kill Di with my own hands this time. This day will not be too long. Lu Ming's eyes flashed with a sharp glint. Good huh? Xie Luan patted Lu Ming's shoulder and laughed. What? At this moment, Xie Luan suddenly turned his gaze to the northern sky. The others were stunned. What did Xie Luan discover? Could it be that Di had returned? However, they soon realized. In the sky to the north, A huge warship broke through the void and was flying at high speed. Boom, boom, boom. As the warship sailed past, it let out a deafening roar. It was like a divine sword that split the space in half. Everyone's expression changed. Could it be that they were coming for them? Who in the divine wilderness continent had the guts to do that? Moreover, they came from the north. Very quickly, they realized that they had been overthinking. The warship was not heading towards them, but was flying past the Demon God Valley. From a distance, the warship was carved with beautiful patterns, and there was a misty light flowing on it. "Look, there are people on the warship," Chu Luo shouted. As expected, they saw a middle-aged man at the bow of the warship. He was wearing a black robe and stood with his hands behind his back. He was just standing there casually, but he seemed to have a domineering temperament. At that moment, the black-robed middle-aged man seemed to have sensed Lu Ming's gaze and looked over. With just a glance, Lu Ming could feel his heart thumping. It was like the vast starry sky, and he felt extremely small. At the side, Xian Yanqing's grip on Lu Ming's hand tightened and his face turned pale. However, this person only glanced at them and didn't look at them again. He turned his head. "So strong. This person is so strong. It's hard to estimate." The barbarian emperor's voice rang out. Lu Ming turned around and was shocked. At that moment, the barbarian emperor's forehead was covered in cold sweat. His eyes were filled with shock. Third-level martial emperor realm. Ciel Wan muttered to himself, his brows tightly furrowed. Everyone was shocked. How is that possible? Third-level martial emperor? How can there be a third-level martial emperor in the divine wilderness continent? Xiuluar exclaimed in disbelief. Who said they are from the divine wilderness continent? I have seen the patterns on that warship overseas 30,000 years ago. If I am not wrong, they are from the divine ruins continent. Xielwan said. The divine ruins continent? Why would the people from the divine ruins continent suddenly come to our divine wilderness continent? The barbarian emperor asked in surprise. Lu Ming, Xian Yanqing, and Yen Kuangtu, on the other hand, looked puzzled. The divine ruins continent? Where was it? From the name, it must be from a mainland overseas. Why would someone from a mainland overseas suddenly descend into the divine wilderness? Chapter 1186. 1186 People from the continent of the divine ruins. The divine ruins continent is a continent that is much stronger than the divine wilderness continent. There are many experts here, so why are you here today? Lu Ming, do you want to go and take a look? Xielwan looked at Lu Ming and asked. Good. Let's go take a look. Lu Ming was also very curious about the sudden arrival of the divine ruins continent. The two of you stay here and guard the place just in case. Lu Ming and I will go and take a look. Xielun instructed Chu Luo and the barbarian emperor, and the two of them nodded. Shao Qing, Big Brother Yen, wait for me here. I'll be back with Senior Xie. Lu Ming said to Xian Yanqing and Yen Kuangtu. Lu Ming, you have to be careful. Xian Yanqing warned. Lu Ming nodded. Let's go. Let's go. Xiel Wan shouted. The demonic light wrapped around Lu Ming, and he stepped into the air and flew out, following the warship from the divine ruins far behind. The warship from the continent of divine ruins kept flying south at a very fast speed, and soon, it flew out of northern plains, territory, and arrived at central continent, flying towards the center of central continent. The people from the continent of the divine ruins seemed to be flying towards the place where the imperial family and the heaven-suppressing divine army are fighting. Xiel Wan softly said. Could it be that one of the two sides invited a helper? Lu Ming's expression changed slightly. If that was the case, the situation in the divine wilderness continent would change drastically. The warship broke through the space and flew extremely fast, quickly approaching the central continent. There's a huge battle ahead, Xiel Wan said as he gazed into the distance. Lu Ming's expression turned grave as he sensed a terrifying pressure coming from the south. He sensed that there was a slight fluctuation in the space. There was definitely a terrifying battle going on, because it could be determined that the battle was still very far away from here. The warship from the continent of the divine ruins suddenly stopped here, and the black-robed middle-aged man standing at the front of the warship looked into the distance. He then stepped out and headed south. "Let's go!" Xie Luan and Lu Ming went around the warship and headed south as well. Boom! Boom! Not long after, he heard a terrifying fluctuation in the sky far away. Lu Ming could vaguely see two figures fighting in the sky. The strength of his aura had actually surpassed that of an ordinary emperor. So strong! Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. The two people fighting had extremely terrifying combat strength. They were above the barbarian emperor and Sulu. Although they were not as terrifying as the battle between Xie Ran and Di, they were not much worse. They should be on the same level as Xie Ran and Di. Below the battle was a huge lake. On both sides of the lake, there were many experts. The Earth's core lake was the place where the imperial family and the heaven-suppressing divine army fought. The black-robed middle-aged man from the divine ruins continent appeared not far away. He looked at the battle ahead and did not participate for the time being. "Xie Sheng, you're already so old. You're no match for me." In the middle of the battle, a voice rang out. Lu Ming's expression changed. He had heard from Xian Yanqing that the previous sacred emperor was called Xie Sheng, and he was the grandfather of the current sacred emperor, Xie Qigan. He had stepped down from his position 6,000 years ago and focused on his cultivation. The outside world thought that after so many years, Xie Sheng had already passed away. However, there were also people who said that Xie Sheng was still alive. However, there had never been any proof. Now, it was proven that Xie Sheng was indeed still alive. The other side is the battle martial emperor. Lu Ming's eyes flickered as he looked into the distance. The man who was fighting with Xie Sheng was a peerless expert of the heaven-suppressing divine army, the 100-battle martial emperor, the one who had won every battle. Both of them were the leaders of their respective forces. Their cultivations had already entered the second level of the martial royal realm, and they were engaged in an intense battle. "Whether I'm a match for you or not, we can't say for sure until we fight to the end. Baijan, I advise you to hand over the Heavenly King token. This is the inheritance of my imperial family. It's not something you can take," said Xie Sheng. His voice was ancient, but it was like thunder, rumbling through heaven and earth, traveling an unknown distance. "Xie Sheng, you're already so old. Don't think about the Heavenly King's order anymore." The battle martial emperor laughed heartily, and the battle between the two became even more intense. In the horizon, when the black-robed middle-aged man in the divine ruins continent heard the three words, "Heavenly King token," he raised his eyebrows and muttered, "I didn't expect the divine wilderness continent's Heavenly King token to still be here. This trip was not in vain." With that, he flicked his sleeves and took a step forward, rapidly approaching the battlefield between Xie Sheng and the Baijan martial emperor. "Who is it? Who is it?" As soon as the black-robed middle-aged man approached, Xie Sheng and the Baijan martial emperor sensed it. They shouted and separated from each other, staring at the black-robed middle-aged man with a serious look. They only noticed the black-robed middle-aged man when he was so close to them. This caused them to be shocked. They scanned the black-clothed middle-aged man with their spiritual sense and realized that they could not see through his strength. They were even more shocked. "What?" Seeing this, Lu Ming and Xie Luan were a little surprised. It seemed that the people from the Divine Ruins continent were not the help of the imperial family or Xie Luan. Otherwise, Xie Sheng and the Baijan martial emperor would not be so surprised. "You have the Heavenly King's order?" The black-robed middle-aged man looked at the battle martial emperor. "Who are you, sir?" The battle martial emperor frowned and asked. "I'm not answering your question. Let me ask you again. Do you have the Heavenly King's order?" The black-robed middle-aged man's voice turned cold. There was a hint of impatience in his tone, and it sounded like he was giving orders. His words made the Baijan martial emperor's face turn ugly. In the divine wilderness continent, no one dared to speak to him in such a tone. "So, what if I have the Heavenly King's token?" The 100 Battles martial emperor said. "Oh, It's good that it's on you. Hand it over, give me the heavenly king's token. The black-robed man said. Haha. The 100 Battles Martial Emperor laughed and said, You're really funny. You appeared out of nowhere and asked me to hand over the heavenly king token. You're too confident. I wonder if you have the ability to be confident. The Battle Martial Emperor's eyes flickered with a cold light. So you're saying that you're not handing it over? Then I'll take it personally. The black-robed middle-aged man took a step forward as soon as he finished speaking. Boom! With this step, the sky and the earth shook violently. Below him, the core lake created thousands of waves. Suppress! An indifferent voice came out of the black-robed middle-aged man's mouth. He struck out with his palm, and endless spiritual chi gathered in the sky. A towering ancient tree as tall as the sky pressed down on the Baijan Martial Emperor. As soon as this move was used, the Battle Martial Emperor's expression changed drastically, and his face became extremely grave. 100 Battle God Fist. The Battle Martial Emperor punched out 100 times in an instant. Each punch contained a monstrous combat power that could penetrate the earth and destroy mountains and rivers. 100 fist forces gathered in the air and merged into one fist force. Its power increased by 100 times. Boom! The fist force hit the ancient tree, making a world-destroying sound. Press! The black-robed middle-aged man spat out another word. He pressed his palm down and the branches of the ancient tree stretched out. Green light shot into the sky. Boom! Baijan Martial Emperor's fist force collapsed instantly, and the towering ancient tree continued to press down on him. Chapter 1187. 1187 Yuan Continent's Big Sect, Heavenly God Sect. The Baijan Martial Emperor's expression changed drastically as he tried his best to counterattack. He kept striking out, but it was all in vain. He was crushed by the towering ancient tree, and in the end, the towering ancient tree heavily bombarded his body. The Battle Martial Emperor screamed and fell into the core lake. Boom! Baijan Martial Emperor's body smashed into the lake, and suddenly, a huge wave appeared in the lake. With Baijan Martial Emperor's body as the center, the lake water rippled and madly rushed in all directions. In a breath's time, the water in the entire core lake was sent flying for hundreds of thousands of miles, turning into steam and dissipating in the air. With the Baijan Martial Emperor as the center, not a single drop of water could be seen within a 100,000-mile radius. Everyone could only see him lying on the ground in the middle of the Earth core lake, coughing up blood. At the scene, everyone from the royal family, the Xie family, and the heaven-suppressing divine army widened their eyes in shock. 100 Battle Martial Emperor was seriously injured by this black-robed middle-aged man with a single strike. How was this possible? A battle-hardened Martial Emperor was the leader of the heaven-suppressing divine army. He was an expert at the peak of the divine wilderness continent. He was invincible and had won every battle. This was how the name Battle Martial Emperor came about. But now, he had been defeated in one move. This was simply unbelievable. Xie Sheng was also shocked and in disbelief. The 100 Battle Martial Emperor was not weaker than him, but he had actually lost so badly. This made him feel a little apprehensive. So strong. In the distance, Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. As expected of a third-level martial royal realm expert. You're overestimating yourself. The black-robed middle-aged man looked down at the battle-tested Martial Emperor and said, Now, are you going to hand it over or not? If you don't hand it over, I can take it myself. There was a hint of killing intent in his voice. His meaning was obvious. If the warring Martial Emperor refused to hand it over, he could kill him and take it himself. The warring Martial Emperor's expression was extremely ugly. He was extremely unwilling, but he was helpless in the face of such an invincible opponent. In the end, he let out a long sigh, took out a token, and threw it to the black-robed middle-aged man. The black-robed man caught the token and glanced at it. A hint of joy appeared on his face. It's indeed the Heavenly King's order. Although the Divine Ruins continent was much stronger than the Divine Wilderness continent, It was still a speck of dust compared to the Yuan continent. It was extremely difficult to join a large faction in the Yuan continent. The Heavenly King token was also a supreme treasure to him. Sir, you are not from the Divine Wilderness continent, right? Xie Sheng looked at the black-robed middle-aged man, his eyes filled with unwillingness. Now that the Heavenly King token had fallen into the hands of the black-robed middle-aged man, the imperial family had no chance. As soon as he said this, the hearts of the people from the royal family and the heaven-suppressing divine army were shocked. If he was not from the Divine Wilderness mainland, could he be from overseas? That's right, I'm from the Divine Ruins continent, God's Gate South God Palace. You've lived for a long time, so you should have heard of it, right? The black-robed middle-aged man explained as he put away the Heavenly King token. He seemed to be in a good mood. What? You are from the Gate of God of the continent of the Divine Ruins? Xie Sheng seemed to be very surprised. His expression changed, and then he became very respectful. He cupped his fists at the middle-aged man in black and said, "So it's the experts of the Gate of God. I'm sorry for not welcoming you. Please forgive me." At the scene, the emperors had similar expressions as Xie Sheng. Other than shock, there was also a trace of respect. When the battle martial emperor heard this, the unwillingness in his eyes finally disappeared, and it was replaced with helplessness. As for those below the emperor rank, their faces were filled with confusion. As expected, they are from the Gate of God. Xie Wan muttered. Senior, is the Gate of God very strong? Lu Ming asked curiously. Of course it's very strong. The primordial realm is vast and boundless. Of course, most of its territory is the sea. The sea is endless, and there are countless continents scattered across the endless sea. Some continents are not far from each other. When they gather in a region, they are called a group of continents, just like the islands in the ocean. Some islands are called islands when they gather together, and it is the same for the continents. Xie Wan explained. Lu Ming was secretly shocked. Outside the Divine Wilderness continent, it was really endless and beautiful. And the sea region where the Divine Wilderness continent is located is called the Divine Ruins Continent Cluster. It is made up of dozens of huge continents. Just from the name, you can tell that the Divine Ruins continent is the most respected continent in this continent cluster. The Divine Ruins continent is vast, at least 10 times the size of the Divine Wilderness continent. There are many experts, outstanding people, and the number of emperors is also much more than the Divine Wilderness continent. And the Divine Ruins continent is completely ruled by one power, and that power is the Gate of God. Xie Wan continued to explain. Lu Ming finally knew how powerful the Gate of God was. The Divine Ruins continent was at least 10 times the size of the Divine Wilderness continent, and it was completely ruled by a single force, the Gate of God. The so-called overlords of the Divine Wilderness continent were as weak as babies in front of the Gate of God. The black-robed middle-aged man, or rather, the worship, was from the Gate of God. I wonder what is the reason for our esteemed guest's visit to the Divine Wilderness? The battle martial emperor flew up to the sky and cupped his fists respectfully. The Heavenly King token had been taken away by the experts of the Gate of God, so he could only choose to forget about it. I am here to bring good fortune to your Divine Wilderness continent. The black-robed middle-aged man said. Bring good fortune? Xie Sheng, the 100 Battles martial emperor, and the rest of the people looked at each other in confusion. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, a rumbling sound could be heard as the warship sailed over. At the front of the warship, a few figures appeared. There were young people and old people, and all of them had powerful auras. That's right, good fortune, a great fortune. The black-robed man's eyes suddenly lit up and he raised his voice. A few months ago, the Gate of God suddenly received news from the Yuan continent. The Yuan continent's Tianxin sect is going to select young elites from the continent group of the Divine Ruins and recruit them as disciples. The Gate of God will do it on behalf of the sect and gather all the prodigies of the continent group of the Divine Ruins together to head to the continent of the Divine Ruins. At that time, An emissary from the Tiantian sect will descend to select disciples. The black-robed middle-aged man's voice spread far and wide, causing a huge commotion. What? The major sects of the continent of the origin are selecting disciples in the continent of the divine ruins? Heavens, there's actually such a thing? Since ancient times, the major sects of the Yuan continent rarely choose disciples from the continent of the divine ruins. Good fortune, this is really a great good fortune. Even the sovereigns couldn't remain calm. They were all discussing excitedly. Thinking about it, it was understandable. A Heavenly King token could only allow one person to join the Heavenly King Hall, a major sect in the Yuanlu continent. It had caused chaos in the central continent and caused the imperial family and the heaven-suppressing divine army to fight each other. From this, it could be seen how difficult and precious it was to enter a major sect to cultivate. But now, without any token, a big sect in the Yuanlu could directly recruit disciples. This was a great fortune. Once they were accepted as disciples by the major sects of the Yuanlu continent, they would have a meteoric rise and a bright future. The cultivation environment of the large sects in the Yuan continent was not something that the divine wilderness continent could compare to. It was countless times better. If the divine wilderness continent was a stinky garbage dump, then the major sects of the Yuan continent were the supreme immortals above the 9 heavens. There was no comparison at all. In that place, the emperor realm was no longer the end point. There was a possibility of one reaching a higher level. As long as he could get rid of De, he would not have to worry about the divine wilderness continent. He could go to the Yuan continent to cultivate in peace. All right, I'll participate in the Tiantian sect's selection. Lu Ming pondered for a moment and nodded. Little Qin, what about you? Lu Ming asked Xian Yanqing. Wherever you go, I'll naturally follow. Xian Yanqing smiled. All right, we'll set off in a few days. Lu Ming nodded. When the news of a large sect recruiting disciples spread, the entire divine wilderness continent was in a state of shock. All the overlord forces stopped fighting each other. Many young Heaven's Pride experts started to move and rush to the Earth Core Lake. Geniuses from the eastern wastelands, southern netherworld, and western desert were all gathering at the Core Lake. Very quickly, 10 days were almost up. Xian Wan brought Lu Ming, Xian Yanqing, to Obashur, and the other elites of northern plains to the Earth Core Lake. The warship from the Divine Ruins continent was still hovering above the Earth Core Lake. The 4 sides of the warship were already surrounded by people. They were all experts from various major forces, and they had arrived with their respective heaven's favorites. Of course, there were still many people who came to watch the show. It could be said that it was a gathering of experts. Everyone waited quietly. Not long after, the warship glowed, and a group of people appeared at the bow of the warship. The person in the lead was the black-clothed middle-aged man. The middle-aged man in black stepped out and flew off the warship. Behind him were 2 young men. They were obviously from the younger generation. Of the 2 young men, one of them had a smile on his face and looked very gentle. The other had a cold and arrogant look on his face. His gaze swept across the people from the divine wilderness continent with a hint of disdain. The younger generation stepped forward. The voice of the black-robed man rang out. Buzz, buzz, bush. One figure after another flew forward and arrived in front of the black-robed middle-aged man and the others. There were thousands of them. The black-robed middle-aged man frowned and said coldly, "Those below the spiritual god level, live. You want to participate in the selection of the major sects of the Yuan continent with such a cultivation?" Hearing this, most of the young men looked helpless and could only step back. Instantly, there were only a few dozen people left on the field. Lu Ming swept his gaze and realized that almost all the elites of the divine wilderness continent were here. Long Chen, Xian Yanjuan, Yang Padin, Shirdu, and the others. Dark Child of the southern underworld, 3-headed hellhound, and the others. Other than the heartless monk and the female bodhisattva of the western desert, there were also 5 more young heaven's favorites. It was truly shocking. Everyone sighed at how powerful the western desert was. In addition, Lu Ming only saw the Emperor God in the East Baron. Obviously, other than the Emperor God, no one else had reached the spiritual God realm. Some of them, such as Shidu, Wu Chengkong, and Di Shin, cast cold gazes at Lu Ming. Emperor God. Lu Ming's eyes swept over Di Shin, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Di still wanted to take him down. If there was a chance, Lu Ming would definitely get rid of Di Shin and collect some interest. Behind the middle-aged man in black, the two young men were also sizing up Lu Ming and the rest. The young man with a smile on his face was still smiling, and there was no change in his expression. However, the cold and arrogant young man's eyes were burning with a fiery light. His gaze swept across Xian Yinjuan, Xian Yanqing, Goddess Tan Xiang, Jing Kongling, and the others, and the fire in his eyes burned even more intensely. Who would have thought that there would be so many stunning beauties in the tiny divine wilderness continent? Hee. The arrogant youth's lips curled up as his heart burned. All right, your cultivation has reached the spiritual God realm, but I still have to screen you. Unless you're a top Heaven's Pride expert, ordinary Heaven's Pride experts will only embarrass them slaviers if they go. Now all of you stand still. I'll test your bloodline. The black-robed middle-aged man's gaze swept across Lu Ming and the rest. Then, a formation disc appeared in his hand. The formation disc glowed and flew into the sky, rapidly expanding. In the end, a beam of light appeared and enveloped Lu Ming and the rest. Chapter 1189. 1189 The continent's prodigy of the war god ruins. After being enveloped by the light pillar, Lu Ming realized that golden rings were emerging from the bodies of the others. It was the chakra. Xian Yanqing had 9 golden chakras while Lu Ming had 8. The black-robed middle-aged man's eyes swept across the crowd. All right, those with 8th-ranked divine-level bloodlines can step down. Only those with 9th-ranked divine-level bloodlines are qualified to participate in the Heavenly God sex selection. Follow me. What? Not even an 8th-level divine-level bloodline was qualified? Only those at the 9th level of the divine level are qualified? Everyone was shocked by his words. These conditions were too high. How many 9th-grade divine-level geniuses were there in the entire divine wilderness? A bunch of frogs in a well. Do you all think that a 9th-level divine-level expert is very impressive? A 9th-level deity might be the top in the small divine wilderness continent. But what was the Yuan continent? The core of the primordial realm, the Tianshan sect, is a large sect in the Yuan continent. The minimum standard for them to recruit disciples is that their bloodline must be of the 9th grade of the god tier. You can't even meet the basic requirements and you still want to join the Heaven God sect. The cold and arrogant youth sneered and revealed a mocking expression. His voice carried an air of superiority. These words made many of the level 8 divine level geniuses' expressions turn ugly, but they didn't dare to refute. All right, 8th level divine level expert, you may leave. The black-robed middle-aged man spoke again. The heavens' favorites, like the God Emperor, Wu Chengkong, and Jing Kongling, all retreated. It seems like I have no chance. Lu Ming gave Xian Yanqing a helpless smile. It's fine. If you don't go, I won't go either. Let's go, he said. Xian Yanqing smiled. Lu Ming nodded, turned around, and flew away with Xian Yanqing. Wait a moment. However, at this moment, a cold shout rang out. Lu Ming and Xian Yanqing turned around and saw the cold and arrogant young man staring at Xian Yanqing. He did not hide the fiery light in his eyes. Lu Ming frowned and his eyes turned cold. You're a 9th level divine level expert. Why did you leave? You don't want your fortune anymore? The arrogant youth said to Xian Yanqing. If he can't meet the requirements, I'll go with him. If he can't go, I naturally won't go either. Xian Yanqing looked at Lu Ming and said, Him. The arrogant youth looked at Lu Ming with a hint of disdain in his eyes. He's just a piece of trash at the 8th level of the divine level. He can't meet the requirements at all. What qualifications does he have to participate? You, on the other hand, are quite talented. Why waste your bright future for a piece of trash? Come with us. Xian Yanqing's face turned cold and he said coldly, "Watch your words. I'm telling you, if he's not going, I'm not going either. Also, he's not a good-for-nothing. Lu Ming, let's go." Xian Yanqing pulled Lu Ming and was about to fly back. Umph. With a cold snort, the arrogant youth moved and appeared in front of Lu Ming and Xian Yanqing, blocking their way. "You've met the requirements and must go. This is not only related to your future, but also to the gate of God." Then he looked at Lu Ming and said, "Kid, if you're smart, get lost. You're a toad lusting after a swan's meat. Do you think you're worthy of this lady?" Lu Ming's expression turned cold. From the very beginning, this person had been looking at Xian Yanqing with ill intentions. Now, he was calling him trash again and again. Did he really think he was noble? Where did this wild dog come from? "If you bark here, get lost." Lu Ming's cold and disdainful voice was heard. The commotion here naturally attracted everyone's attention. Everyone at the scene looked over. At this moment, many people were shocked when they heard Lu Ming's words. This Lu Ming is really gutsy. He actually dares to berate the Divine Ruins Continent's paragon like this? It's over. Lu Ming is in trouble. Simply courting death. He doesn't know what's good for him. I think he's just used to being arrogant in the Divine Wilderness Continent. Some people sighed, while others sneered and gloated. "Kid, what did you say?" Chapter 1190. 1190 Chapter 1190 Suppression. Break. Lu Ming's eyes turned cold, and the 8 streams of dragon power in his body burst out, sending a punch at Qing Mu. Boom! Lu Ming's fist landed heavily on the greenwood. Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, the greenwood exploded and turned into green energy that disappeared into the world. In the green light, the cold and arrogant youth's figure appeared. At this time, his face no longer had any cold and arrogant expression, only disbelief, shock, and disbelief. He found it hard to believe that his most powerful attack, which he had used to fuse his blood meridians with, was actually defeated by Lu Ming in one move. He could not believe that there was such a powerful person in the Divine Wilderness Continent. Furthermore, Lu Ming's bloodline was clearly only at the 8th level of the divine level. He was not the only one. The others present were also shocked. My God, Lu Ming's combat strength has become even more terrifying. He actually defeated a giant heaven's favorite at the peak of the 4th level of the spiritual god realm in one move. With such combat strength, could he be able to compete with Long Chen? Maybe. Many people were talking about it, and even some emperors were shocked. In the crowd, Long Chen's expression was a little serious, which was rare. He stared at Lu Ming, but he quickly regained his calm and returned to his indifferent state. Damn it. In Lion City, Ming Zi was equivalent to someone who had a grudge against Lu Ming. While he was shocked, he also gritted his teeth secretly. Lu Ming had become stronger. The hope of them taking revenge and defeating Lu Ming had become slimmer. Behind the black-robed middle-aged man, the smile on the young man's face disappeared and was replaced by a serious expression. Interesting. The black-robed middle-aged man also revealed a surprised expression. Lu Ming looked at the cold and arrogant young man indifferently. Is this your strength? Is this the capital you have to be arrogant? You can't even take a single move from me? How laughable. You keep calling me trash, then, what are you? His voice was indifferent and full of disdain. Brat, you're dead. The arrogant young man's face turned red and he let out an angry roar. He glared at Lu Ming coldly, wishing he could cut Lu Ming into 8 pieces. Buzz! Lu Ming could not be bothered to waste his breath on him. He took a step forward and, like a flash of light, his figure appeared in front of the cold and arrogant youth in an instant. He slapped him. You dare. The cold and arrogant youth was shocked. He did not expect Lu Ming to dare to attack again. In a hurry, he tried his best to block, but how could he block it? He was sent flying by Lu Ming's slap. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming flew up and used the 9 dragons' heaven-stomping steps. He took 7 consecutive steps, each one aimed at the cold and arrogant youth's face. Bang! Bang! 7 consecutive steps landed on the young man's face, leaving a row of footprints on his face. The young man's body was like a meteorite directly falling into the core lake. With a boom, the cold and arrogant youth's body fell into the geocentric lake, causing thousands of waves. He could no longer be seen. CSI! Gasps were heard. Lu Ming was so bold. He wouldn't have killed the prodigy of the continent of divine ruins, would he? The next moment, a ripple came from the core lake, and the cold and arrogant youth rushed out. At this moment he was in an extremely sorry state. His hair was disheveled and his body was in tatters. His face, in particular, had a row of clear footprints. Blood was constantly flowing out of the corners of his mouth, eyes, and nostrils. It was truly a tragic sight. Bastard, I want you dead. Men, kill him. Kill him. The cold and arrogant young man shouted hysterically. Enough. However, now that he saw that Xian Yinjuan was not on Lu Ming's side, his heart was suddenly filled with excitement. Mu Feng smiled charmingly and walked towards Xian Yinjuan. He stopped in front of Xian Yinjuan's table and said, "Young lady, may I sit here?" Xian Yinjuan glanced at Mu Feng coldly and did not say anything. Mu Feng's eyes narrowed as he sat down and said, "My name is Mu Feng. I believe you have heard of me. There are many things that you need to pay attention to on your trip to the Divine Ruins continent. The Divine Ruins is not like the Divine Wilderness." Chapter 1193. 1193 Continent Group of the Divine Ruins. With his talent, even though he was a prodigy in the Divine Ruins continent, he was not considered the top. His status was very awkward, which was why he applied to come to the Divine Wilderness continent. He had originally thought that he could show off in the Divine Wilderness continent, suppressing all the so-called elites of the Divine Wilderness continent beneath his feet. In his imagination, wouldn't these country bumpkins of the Divine Wilderness continent try to curry favor with him, and even have beautiful women throw themselves into his arms? However, the reality was far from what he had imagined. From the beginning, he had been beaten up badly by Lu Ming. However, the elders seemed to value Lu Ming's talent and wanted him to apologize. And now, Xian Yinjuan and Long Chen were still the same. He was going to make a move. He was going to cripple Long Chen with a thunderous method and make an example of him. He was going to make the rest of the Divine Wilderness continent fear him and make Xian Yinjuan obediently throw herself into his arms. He strode toward Long Chen. At the side, Lu Ming, Xian Yinqing, the unscrupulous monk, Shidu, and the others watched with interest. Long Chen was now engaged to Xian Yinlin, and Xian Yinjuan was her sister. If something happened to Xian Yinjuan, Long Chen naturally wouldn't sit by and do nothing. Mu Feng was about to fight Long Chen. They were curious if Mu Feng could test Long Chen's strength. Swish! Mu Feng was very direct. He directly attacked Long Chen with his palm. The wind from his palm whistled, and the force of his attack surged in the restaurant. However, this was inside the ship. The ship was made of an extremely hard metal, and its entire body was engraved with runes. Even an emperor would not be able to destroy it easily, so it could naturally block the force. Get lost! Long Chen sat still and struck out with his palm. Bang! The two palms collided, and Mu Feng was forced back 7 or 8 steps. Long Chen, on the other hand, was still sitting there, motionless. Damn it! You're courting death! Mu Feng roared. His face turned red, and his aura became even more violent. The blood vessels appeared above his head. He shouted and attacked Long Chen again. Apart from the bloodline fusion, this was his strongest move. He did not believe it. He did not believe that the people of the Divine Wilderness continent were so strong. Long Chen stood up. One of his arms suddenly became twice as thick as usual, and he threw a punch. This punch was extremely destructive. It destroyed all of Mu Feng's attacks and landed on Mu Feng's palm. Gotcha! Mu Feng's palm was completely deformed. He let out a scream and his body flew far away like a kite with a broken string. He hit the wall heavily and blood spurted out of his mouth. On the side, the unscrupulous monk, Sherdu, and the others focused their eyes on Long Chen, their eyes filled with solemnity. Long Chen's combat strength has become stronger again. Lu Ming's heart stirred. He had used the same move to defeat Tuobashir in the Holy City. Now, he had defeated Mu Feng with the same move. He still gave off an unfathomable feeling. Other than the people from the Divine Wilderness continent, the people from the Divine Ruins continent were even more shocked. It seems like the Divine Wilderness continent has produced a few impressive elites. Some people from the continent of the Divine Ruins side. Get lost. Long Chen's eyes fell on Mu Feng. Mu Feng struggled to get up. His eyes were about to spit fire. He was so aggrieved. He had originally thought that he could show off in the Divine Wilderness continent, but he had never expected to be beaten up. You guys, just you wait. Mu Feng left with his tail between his legs. Long Chen sat down and continued to drink, and the scene returned to peace. Fourth level of the spiritual god realm. It was obvious that Darkchild had also made a breakthrough during this period of time and stepped into the fourth level spiritual god realm. If you want to fight, I'll accompany you. A cold voice came out of Darkchild's mouth. Fourth level spiritual god realm. The Divine Wilderness continent has finally produced a decent person. However, he has just broken through to the fourth level spiritual god realm not long ago. Chapter 1196. 1196 Chapter 1196 Smashing like a hammer. Bang, bang, bang. The Crocodile Emperor's four limbs stepped in the air, making a loud noise as it crawled towards Mingzi. Its scales glowed as it opened its mouth, looking very ferocious. Buzz! A huge claw came down on Darkchild. Dark chi grew thicker around Darkchild's body. The bloodline of the death god appeared above his head. Facing such a powerful enemy, Darkchild performed bloodline fusion and transformed into the god of death without any concealment. The death flame jumped and the Reaper's scythe slashed at the Crocodile King. Buzz! The Grim Reaper's scythe struck the Crocodile Emperor's claw, producing a clanging sound. Sparks flew in all directions. The Grim Reaper that Mingzi had transformed into stepped in the void and retreated continuously. However, the Crocodile Emperor's body trembled, and it did not pursue him immediately. So it can directly attack the soul. Unfortunately, it's not powerful enough. What can it do to me? Kill. The Crocodile Emperor was a little surprised. Its body glowed immediately, and with an angry roar, it continued to attack Mingzi. Mingzi's face changed. The death god's body began to separate and finally turned into 12 death gods, surrounding the Crocodile Emperor. Darkchild's Tulavir Capital Heaven Battle Formation. Buzz, buzz, bush. Tulavir Death God Doppelgangers and Tulavir Death God Scythes slashed at the Crocodile King. Small tricks. The Crocodile Emperor's voice came out. Its tail swept across thousands of soldiers and shattered the space. With a series of rumbles, 7 or 8 Grim Reapers were sent flying. The remaining Grim Reapers were also sent flying by the Crocodile Emperor's giant claw. The Crocodile Emperor only shook a few times. Light began to spread as if it was resisting the soul attack of the Grim Reapers. Then, as if nothing had happened, he continued to attack Darkchild. Bang! With a swing of its tail, one of the death gods exploded. Then, the Crocodile King spat out a beam of light, which killed one of the death gods. Darkchild was no match for his opponent. After more than 10 moves, he was completely suppressed. His 12 clones were defeated continuously. Soon, only one of the 12 death gods was left. It was torn apart by the Crocodile Emperor's claws. Mingzi's real body appeared and he retreated rapidly, spitting out blood. Darkchild was defeated. He was also no match. Can't even withstand a single blow. It seems like the strongest in the Divine Wilderness continent is only at this level. The Crocodile Emperor looked arrogantly at Lu Ming and the rest. Lu Ming and Xian Yanqing's expressions did not change. However, the rest of the people did not look too good. Even Dark Child had been defeated. The remaining people like the unscrupulous monk and Yang Padian were not confident at all. Their combat strength might not be able to defeat Dark Child. It seems like the Divine Wilderness continent is bound to lose. They don't have any exceptional paragons. That's right. I just don't know the ranking of the person who attacked you on the Shen-Yi continent. The peak of the 4th level of the spiritual god realm. I'm sure that the Shen-Yi continent's ranking is not low. The Shen-Yi continent is not stupid. They will naturally send out experts. The surrounding people were discussing. Next, which one of you will make a move? The Crocodile Emperor continued to speak. It seemed that it was really going to fight them one by one. The expressions of the unscrupulous monk, Yang Padian, and the others changed, but they didn't say anything. Truly trash. How about this, all of you come at me together, and I'll take care of both of you. I'll let all of you be sincerely convinced and roll down General Peak. The Crocodile Emperor spoke arrogantly. Xian Yanqing blinked his big eyes and looked at Lu Ming. Did he mean that Lu Ming was not confident in defeating Long Chen? The peak of the 5th level of the spiritual god realm and the Archean dragonesque elephant bloodline are indeed freakishly strong. However, when have I ever lost in a battle of the same level? Lu Ming smiled confidently. He had a rough idea of Long Chen's strength. You're so smug. Xian Yanqing pouted, but he still had a smile on his face. As the two of them conversed, they returned to the courtyard and continued cultivating. There were less than 3 months before the selection of the disciples of the Tianshan sect. Everyone wanted to seize the time to cultivate and improve their strength. The stronger they were, the higher the chance of being selected. Time flew by, and half a month had passed. Lu Ming cultivated diligently every day and made great progress. He had improved a lot in all kinds of concepts. However, his Earth concept was still at the peak of the lower tier of level 4 and had not entered the upper tier. On the other hand, Lu Ming had cultivated the 9 Dragons heaven-treading steps to the 8th step in one go. The 8th step was already equivalent to the power of a high-grade divine-level martial arts technique. With Lu Ming's current cultivation, he could not unleash its full power. However, when he cast it, the power would undoubtedly be stronger, and Lu Ming's combat strength would be enhanced again. On this day, Lu Ming and Xian Yanqing left together. It had been more than half a month since they came to the Divine Ruins Continent's South Deity Palace, and they had yet to walk around. The two of them planned on walking around and experiencing the local customs of the Divine Ruins Continent. They also wanted to see if there were any treasures, spiritual herbs, and materials that the Divine Wilderness Continent did not have. They could buy some of them. In particular, some of the ingredients for the Nirvana elixir were already very difficult to find in the Divine Wilderness Continent. However, in the Divine Ruins Continent, it might not be the same. Perhaps he could find some. The two of them flew out of the General Peak and headed towards a bustling street. Brother Lu, Monsieur, what a coincidence! A voice came from the side. Brother Yi. Lu Ming took a look. It was Yi Chuan. Are the two of you planning to go shopping? Yi Chuan said. That's right, I've been here for half a month and I haven't even taken a look around. Lu Ming said with a smile. Do the two of you have a place to go? Yi Chuan asked. No, I'm just looking around to see if I can buy some materials, spirit herbs, and the like. Lu Ming said. If it's ordinary spiritual herbs and materials, ordinary markets will have them. If it's rare materials and spiritual medicines, it's hard to find them in ordinary markets. I do know a place where you can obtain some very precious materials and spiritual medicines. Yi Chuan said. Oh, what place is it? Lu Ming's eyes lit up. Treasure Exchange Tower. Treasure Exchange Tower? Lu Ming was puzzled. As the name implies, the Treasure Exchange Tower is a place to exchange treasures. As long as you enter, you can take out treasures you don't need and exchange them for treasures you need from others. If someone needs them, they will naturally take them out to exchange. In this way, you can obtain some rare treasures. Yi Chuan explained. There's such a place? Let's go take a look. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. I was also going to the treasure exchange tower. Let me lead the way. Yi Chuan said generously. Yi Chuan led the way, and the three of them landed on a street. They walked along the street, took a detour, and came to a huge building. It was a pavilion, but it was extremely wide and occupied a large area. It had 7 floors and reached straight into the sky. Chapter 1199. 1199 Chapter 1199 Sky Thunderwood. The treasure exchange tower used to be a place for the older generation to exchange for treasures. However, recently, the prodigies of the various continents have gathered. I heard that Ji Hongqian has reserved the entire place for the prodigies of the younger generation to exchange for treasures. Yi Chuan explained. Ji Hongqian. Lu Ming and Xian Yanqing were slightly stunned. Ji Hongqian is one of the 3 strongest heaven's favorites in our South God Palace. He is a peerless beauty. Perhaps he is on the highest level today. If there is a chance, we might be able to meet him. When Ji Hongqian was mentioned, Yi Chuan's eyes lit up. Lu Ming smiled and the 3 of them walked towards the treasure exchange tower. The treasure exchange tower had a total of 7 floors. One had to pay a certain fee to enter. To enter the first floor, one had to pay 1,000 raw stones per person. The higher the floor, the higher the number of raw stones needed to be paid. The 3 of them paid the fee and stepped into a door of light. That's right, the doors of the treasure exchange tower were not ordinary doors. They were all teleportation doors. Entering meant being teleported in. After the 3 of them stepped through the portal, they appeared on the side of a hall. The hall was extremely spacious and huge. Rows of tables and chairs were arranged in the surroundings of the hall. At this moment, many people were already seated on those tables and chairs. In the middle of the tables and chairs, there was a large open space. At this moment, a young man was standing in the open space, holding a treasure in his hand. A piece of flint star iron, a top-tier lever 7 blacksmithing material. It can be exchanged for 3 wind god pills. Whoever has 3 wind god pills can have this piece of flint star iron. The young man looked around and his voice spread throughout the hall. I happen to have 3 wind god pills. I'll trade with you. After a while, a young woman stood up, took out a jade bottle, and handed it to the young man. The young man opened the jade bottle and looked at it. He revealed a happy expression and said, "It's really the wind god pill. Thank you. This piece of Sway Star refined iron is for you." The young man handed the Sway Star refined iron to the young woman. They both got what they wanted and sat down with joy. The first level is for those whose cultivation is not high. There are rarely any high-quality items here. Let's go up. Yi Chuan said. Lu Ming nodded. He used his spiritual senses to scan the area and realized that most of the youths on this level were below the spiritual god level. The 3 of them walked towards another door of light. The passage between each level required a teleportation gate. There were also guards at the teleportation gate. The 3 of them handed over the Ori rocks and stepped into the teleportation gate. The layout of the second floor was exactly the same as the first floor, but there were fewer people. However, their cultivation was stronger than the first floor. In the first few levels, the 3 of them did not stop. Soon, they arrived at the 5th floor. Brother Yi, do you still want to continue going up? I'll stay on this floor and see if there's anything I need. Yi Chuan said. Please go ahead, Brother Yi. We'll go up and take a look again. Lu Ming said. The materials required for the Nirvana elixir were extremely rare. The higher one went, the higher the cultivation level of the geniuses, and the higher the possibility of them appearing. Lu Ming intended to continue to move upwards. Good, I wish you good luck. You can exchange for what you need. Yi Chuan cupped his fists and walked to the hall. He sat down on a chair. Lu Ming and Xian Yanqing continued to walk towards a door of light and arrived at the 6th level. So you are from the Xin-Yi continent. The corners of Lu Ming's mouth curled up slightly. He ignored the looks from the god's alligator continent's paragon and sat down at a table by the side. At this moment, in the middle of the hall, there was a young man holding a treasure, wanting to exchange it for the treasure he needed. However, this young man asked several times, but no one answered. It was obvious that no one had the treasure he needed. In the end, the young man sighed and left helplessly. After this person retreated, another person stepped forward with a milky white horn in his hand. This is the horn of a sacred light tiger. It's a top-grade 8th grade material and can be exchanged for a low-grade divine-grade movement technique. Whoever has it can take this sacred light tiger's horn. The man introduced. The treasures on the 6th floor are indeed of a much higher grade than the ones on the lower floors. Lu Ming's heart stirred. However, the sacred light tiger's horn wasn't something that he and Xian Yanqing needed, so the two of them naturally didn't say anything. I'll use a movement technique to exchange with you. A young man stood up and took out a secret manual. The two of them exchanged and both of them were happy. Following that, the young men and women stepped forward one by one, took out their treasures, and told them what they needed. Of course, it was impossible for everyone to exchange for the treasures they needed. Some people would settle for second best, and if someone could afford a good price, they would sell it directly for a sum of raw gemstones. Lu Ming and Xian Yanqing looked at it for half an hour. Unfortunately, they did not find the treasure they needed. It seems like we have to go to the 7th floor to take a look. Lu Ming smiled bitterly at Xian Yanqing. I have a piece of sky thunder wood with me. I want to exchange it for a purple smoke fruit. At this moment, a voice was heard, jolting Lu Ming. Sky thunder wood. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. The sky thunder wood actually had a powerful thunder power. It was very effective to use it to comprehend the thunder mentality. One of Lu Ming's concepts was the thunder concept. If he used the sky thunder wood to comprehend it, he could save a lot of time on comprehending the thunder concept. However, Lu Ming did not have any purple smoke fruit. He frowned slightly. Fortunately, some of the other people present were also tempted, but no one said anything for a while. Clearly, there were no more purple smoke fruits. Are there no purple smoke fruits? The young man who took out the sky thunder wood asked with a disappointed expression. Brother, is it possible to purchase it with raw stones? Someone asked. The young man who took out the sky thunder wood pondered for a moment and said, since there's no purple smoke fruit, I'll buy it with raw stones. You can bid, and the one with the highest price will get it. I'll pay 500,000 raw stones. Someone immediately made a bid. I'll pay 600,000. I bid 650,000. Soon, the price rose steadily, and it was called to 800,000 raw stones. The thunder mentality was one of the 9 commonly seen mentalities. Naturally, there were many people who had comprehended it, and there were also many people who made bids. Therefore, Lu Ming was not in a hurry to make a bid. Very quickly, the price rose to 1 million raw stones. I'll pay 2 million raw stones. At this time, a voice rang out, directly doubling the price. It's him. He's a heaven's favorite from the Shen-Yi continent. Lu Ming's eyes flickered as he recognized the young man who suddenly raised the bid. This person was the strongest expert on the Shen-Yi continent. He was at the peak of the 5th level of the spiritual god realm, but he was easily defeated by Long Chen half a month ago. They are the Divine Wilderness Continent's elites. The man's name is Lu Ming, and the woman's name is Xian Yanqing. Mu Feng said, Divine Wilderness Continent? I've heard that Long Chen's combat strength is pretty good, but what about these two? How is it? The noble young master said, that Lu Ming's combat ability is slightly stronger than mine. The woman should be average. Mu Feng deliberately said that Lu Ming's combat strength was only slightly stronger than his. Yeah, that woman is not bad. I never thought that there would be such a beauty in the Divine Wilderness Continent. The noble young master stared at Xian Yanqing, his eyes burning with passion. If cousin wants it, why don't you take it? Mu Feng suggested. That's good. After the treasure exchange is over, I'll send someone to bring this woman to my mansion. The noble young master said. His words were filled with great confidence, as if the decision he made was the only way things would happen. The two of them were using voice transmissions, so Lu Ming did not hear them. However, he could still feel their gazes. Mu Feng. Lu Ming's eyes turned cold as he walked over to a table with Xian Yanqing. At the same time, Lu Ming's gaze swept across the room. There were only 20-odd people on the 7th floor, but all of them were full of energy. They gave off a shocking aura, and it was clear that they were the cream of the crop. Among them, the aura of a few people made Lu Ming frown. He felt a sense of danger. What caught Lu Ming's attention the most was a lady sitting at the head of the table. She was wearing a fiery red dress that looked like a blooming flower. She was beautiful, but she also had a heroic spirit. She had a strange temperament, but it didn't stand out on her. Instead, it was very harmonious, forming a different kind of beauty. She was indeed beautiful, not inferior to the 5 great beauties of Central Continent. What's wrong? You can't take your eyes off a beauty, are you tempted? Xian Yanqing's voice rang in Lu Ming's ears. What's wrong? Are you jealous? Lu Ming looked at Xian Yanqing teasingly. I don't have any. Xian Yanqing pouted. How can she be as pretty as you? Why would I be moved? Lu Ming said softly, causing Xian Yanqing to blush slightly. He gave Lu Ming an expression that said, at least you know your place. The two of them sat to one side. At this moment, a young man was taking out a treasure and wanted to exchange it with the others. It was indeed the 7th level. The treasures were indeed different. It was a piece of golden iron mother. It was very rare and was the best material to refine spirit weapons. Even Lu Ming was tempted. Unfortunately, he did not have what the other party needed. Soon, the young man sighed and put it away. Then his palm glowed, and a glistening yellow stone appeared. This is the Divine Ruins, ancient mine. Someone said. That's right, it's precisely the Divine Ruins, ancient mine. The young man replied. Everyone also knows that inside the Divine Ruins, ancient mines, there might be peerless and rare treasures. Right now, I have 3 pieces in my hands, all obtained from the Divine Ruins interior. Now, these 3 pieces, I'll sell them all. Whoever offers the highest price will get it. 2 more yellow stones appeared in the young man's palm. There were 3 of them in total. Chapter 1202. 1202 Chapter 1202 Fight. Divine Ruins Ancient Mine? Lu Ming's expression changed. He was somewhat curious. Previously, when they took the cross-sea spaceship to the continent of the Divine Ruins for a month, they more or less had some understanding of the continent of the Divine Ruins. The reason why the continent of the Divine Ruins was called the continent of the Divine Ruins was that there were a few pieces of divine ruins on the continent of the Divine Ruins, known as the Ruins of Gods. Inside, it was very dangerous, but it was also filled with endless treasures and contained endless mysteries, so it was called the Divine Ruins. Legend had it that the Divine Ruins originally did not exist. Countless years ago, the sky split open, and countless things fell from the sky, forming the Divine Ruins. From the Divine Ruins, one could excavate a kind of ore called the Divine Ruins Ancient Ore. Within the ore, there might be supreme treasures. Some people took out supreme divine weapons, some took out supreme secret manuals, and some even took out the bones, blood, essence, and so on of supreme experts. They were all supreme treasures. Of course, there was a higher possibility that there was nothing inside. At the scene, no one made a sound. Buying the Divine Ruins Ancient Mine was like gambling. Buying it, one might not get anything. The chances of wanting to cut out treasures from the Divine Ruins Ancient Mine were too low. Beside Mu Feng, there seemed to be flames dancing in the eyes of the noble young master. His eyes were fixed on one of the ancient mines in the Divine Ruins, as if he had sensed something. Lu Ming, I suggest you buy it. There's something good in one of the old mines that might be of help to you. At this moment, Danden's voice was heard. After this fellow entered the treasure exchange tower, he had been lying on Lu Ming's shoulder and did not make a sound. But now, he suddenly sent Lu Ming a voice transmission. You can sense the things in the divine ruins, ancient mine. Lu Ming was stunned. It was said that the layer of glistening yellow or outside the divine ruins, ancient mine was very strange. It could block spiritual senses from scanning. If one did not cut open the ancient mine, the martial artist would not be able to know in advance if there was anything inside, let alone what it was. Only in very rare cases would he sense it. For example, the noble young master's bloodline was faintly beating. He felt that there was something in the old mine that matched his bloodline, which was why he could sense it. This old mine is mine. The noble young master's eyes were bright as he said, I'll bet 100,000 raw stones on my luck. 100,000 raw gemstones was not a high price, but it was not low either. If the 3 old mines were empty, the 100,000 raw stones would have gone down the drain. Mujue, you're so rich. 100,000 raw stones is nothing to you. I'm not as rich as you, so I'm not betting. I'll forget it too. On the side, the other young men laughed. There were many ancient mines in the divine ruins in other places of the South God Palace. If one wanted to buy them, they could buy them at any time. Therefore, the others shook their heads and did not bid. This made Muju smile. If he could buy a raw gemstone with a treasure for 100,000 raw gemstones, he would make a huge profit. His heart trembled. I offer 200,000 origin stones. It's my first time seeing a divine ruins ancient mine. It's rather interesting. I'll try my luck too. Lu Ming said calmly. Lu Ming's words made Muju's eyes turn cold. I'll pay 300,000. Mujue said. Then I'll pay 500,000. Lu Ming said. This made Mujue's face even more unsightly. His eyes were cold, and the aura around him became violent. A layer of flames spread out from his body. At the side, the others looked on quietly, and no one stopped them. In this world, treasures could only be obtained and protected if one had the strength. Buzz! Muju waved his hand and a long whip condensed from flames whipped toward Lu Ming's face. You really think I'm a soft persimmon? A cold glint flashed in Lu Ming's eyes. His palm was like a knife and he slashed out.